Good evening. Welcome. Hello. My name is Jerry Milana, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as the board president for the UC San Diego Alumni Association. And like all of you here in the room, I'm an alum. I graduated in 1986 from Third College. Now, Marshall, go Third, right? We are so delighted to have all of you join us here for the Taste of UCSD and really day 2 of our annual alumni weekend. Along with tonight's event, there are so many more activities over the weekend, and I hope you can all join us. Tomorrow, we have our conversation with Wong Fu, our 3 fantastic alums. We also have our 50th anniversary for Revelle College, so for all you Revellians, big day for Revelle tomorrow. And then also we have a fabulous event downtown San Diego at Rare Form and fair weather. And then on Saturday morning is our 5K run, and I know this year is a record year of participants either running or walking in the event that raises money for scholarships. And then on Saturday evening is our alumni celebration dinner. And then on Sunday, we have our True Triton brunch. And I do hope that not only tonight, that you come back to campus and celebrate with us this weekend. It's truly a terrific feeling to come back. And I don't know about you. Gosh, I graduated again in 1986, and every time I come back on campus, I learn something new. There's a new building, there's a new program, and I know you're all smiling and laughing, but it's true. And you know what's terrific about tonight's program? It's called Taste of UCSD. And what we have in store for you this evening is really a taste. First, an intellectual taste with 5 fabulous faculty speakers. So they will inspire you in small bits, again, a taste. And then after, we're going to adjourn and step outside into the courtyard and then really have a taste from our taste masters and brew masters. I got that right. Taste masters and brew crafters. All right. I was joking with our fabulous speakers before the program about going over time, so I better get off the stage because they are actually limited to 7 minutes each. So again, it's going to be a fabulous program tonight, and I do hope to see you all this weekend. And at this time, I'd like to invite to this stage my dear friend, Armin Afsahi. Please join me. Armin is our Associate Vice Chancellor of Advancement and also our Chief Alumni Officer. And he also, he's a Revellian, so he's excited about tomorrow evening.
That's why we were correcting you when you couldn't remember.
Of Revelle, because I'm a Marshall third grad. So with that, Armin is actually going to introduce our fabulous speakers as we get a taste of imagination and creativity in the next few minutes. So there you go.
Thank you. How about a hand for Jerry Milana? I have never met someone who speaks so eloquently. I mean, you enunciate everything just right. So it's always hard to come after you. So I'm going to do my best. But good evening, everyone. First of all the alums in the room, wave your hands, because this should be your weekend. That's amazing. Welcome back to campus. We know we have people from as far away as Oregon with us tonight. So I think tomorrow we may have someone from Asia. So we're trying to get more and more people coming to visit for Alumni Weekend. And it's been just a terrific journey for us to see this tradition grow. And it just delights us when you all choose to give up a day, a night, a weekend, a week for some of you to be with us. So thank you for that, and happy Alumni Weekend. I have the dubious pleasure of introducing these 5 stellar faculty. We love this event because, you know, all of us who attended those lectures, you know, the quarter system, you know, was brutal. We would go to this class. We had to listen for 50 minutes, sometimes 2 hours, to our professors, and then go get the lecture notes so we could follow what we fell asleep through perhaps at times. I went to school here in the 80s, so that's how we made it through. But the thing that we've challenged these brilliant scholars is to talk about their craft and their scholarly work and their passion in just 7 minutes. And I know, I'm sorry, but Amelia, that's her rules, and she's got a stopwatch with her. So, but as Jerry said, this is just for us to give you a tease into their minds and to the work that they do with their graduate students and their peers and colleagues around the campus and around the world to really do some game-changing science and research. And so it's the 7 minutes is just a beginning. When we go back outside to what Jerry talked about is really when the magic always happens. And we're going to have to try to get you guys out of this courtyard. We'll stay as long as we can, but I guarantee you it's going to be a wonderful evening. So without further ado, the 5 speakers, I'm going to tell you briefly a little bit, very little about each of them, and then they'll come in the order and they'll just follow kind of like a TEDx format. So Professor J.S. Chen, he specializes in extreme events, both man-made and from natural disasters, including earthquakes, landslides, floods. And he's been newly recruited to lead our new Center for Extreme Events Research at the Jacobs School. He'll be followed by Emilie Hafner-Burton. Emilie recently, she's right here to my right next to Professor Chen. She recently received a UC Endowed Chair supported by MacArthur Foundation. And earlier I said, are you a MacArthur Fellow? She goes, well, I was a MacArthur Fellow, and now I'm an Endowed Chair. So she's pretty smart. She specializes in international human rights. She's an expert and is now leading the Laboratory on International Law and Regulation at our School of Global Policy and Strategy, IRPS, for those of us from prior years. Keith Pezzoli will follow Emilie, and Keith, some of you that fly on Southwest may be familiar with him because he's one of the many faces of our faculty experts inside the Southwest magazine. He leads the Global Food Initiative at UC San Diego, and just this past March, he hosted both Chancellor Khosla and UC President Napolitano to community gardens that he and his team are transforming in the southeastern region of San Diego. Kim Rubinstein will be next. She'll be our 4th speaker, and she's working on cultivating the creative mind on how to have optimal creative thinking. And she's working with our Dean of Graduate Studies, Dr. Barrett, on a pilot class for graduate students in the hopes of having this class taught to all graduate students at UC San Diego, which is really exciting as part of our Center for Engaged Teaching. She teaches scientists how to take a general public, how to talk to a general public. One of the things she may talk about is her work with Alan Alda, who's doing some incredible work in helping scientists transform their science into storytelling and into compelling ways and narratives. And lastly, we'll have Jonathan Watanabe. Yes? Watanabe, sorry. Yes, and he's going to close it out for us. And he believes the pharmacists and pharmacies have a part in improving the care of seniors. He works with seniors, particularly those that are at low income and women or minorities. He hopes to improve care, making them more independent. And he has worked with seniors in San Ysidro and many other areas in San Diego. So Professor Chen, if you're ready, we'd like to ask you to come up and enjoy.
First of all, welcome to the Taste of UCSD. And it was interesting to find out I will be the first one to be tasted. And be tested in 7 minutes. I'll see what I can do. Okay, so what I'm going to talk to you today is about the research work that we were doing here at UCSD on the development of a new generation of computational technology that allows us to do the simulation on, for example, the extreme events. That's what I'm going to talk to you today. And you can then use the simulation results, the computer results, simulation results to do assessment of the integrity of the infrastructures. What you see at the top is the computer simulation of landslide due to earthquake. Underneath that is the numerical simulation of the slope instability when the foundation of the building sitting on top of the slope is not very well designed. Underneath that is the numerical simulation of another type of extreme events, which is a man-made reinforced extreme events. As you know, after September 11, this becomes a very important topic. And you can use this to simulate, for example, the level of damages in the structures. And when this is subjected to penetration, we also use this to simulate the structural damages under blast. We can also apply this kind of technology to the modeling. For example, in this case, this is the JPL project that we're involved in the design of the rover. Before you send the rover to Mars, the mission is to find out whether there's any evidence of water and then evidence of life. And they already found water, right? So we're involved in this project. We use this kind of method to simulate the interactions between the wheel and the soil. And as you know, human being would never been on Mars, right? So you have to do simulation because there's no information about soil properties. Through simulation, you can test how this device will work under different kinds of environmental conditions, temperatures, and so on and so forth. This is a perfect example that one cannot do laboratory testing, but you can do numerical simulation if the simulation results have been validated. Here is an example, numerical simulation of landslides subjected to the earthquake acceleration recorded in 1971, the San Fernando earthquake. And as you can see, the color represents the damage in the soil. It's called a shear band. And the shear failure of the soil, once they get connected, it forms a sliding plane. And that's where the landslide happens. Once you understand how the earth is damaged and sheared by an earthquake, then this will help you to design, for example, the reinforcement of the slope so that it can sustain certain scales of natural disasters. Well, we would also like to protect not just the infrastructures, but also the human body, human brain, and in general biosystems. This new generation of computational methods use points to do the simulation, which is very, very different from the traditional way of doing the simulation, which requires a generation of something called a mesh. The nice thing about using points directly in the simulation is that you can now take the images, whatever the images that you can get, for example, for human will be CT scans, MRI, and you just take all these images and you take the pixel points, and directly by hooking to our simulation software, then you can do the simulation right away. If you know the material properties, you can put the material properties and you take the images, you can do the simulation on, for example, how the bone is damaged due to extreme events, the muscle damage. We can even do the molecular scale simulation, looking into multi-scale type of response of human tissues, bones, and muscles in response to the extreme events. With all these computer simulation technologies, we then form a new center called the Center for Extreme Events Research. And so now we combine numerical simulation together with some of the very unique testing facilities that we have here in structural engineering. What you see at the top is called the Extreme Event Simulator, which is a hardware, is the only one and the only one in the world that allows one to do the assessment of structural damage subjected to blast load. Well, traditional way of doing that is to put explosives. Is to do that in the open field, do the field testing, and you really blow up your explosives and see how the structure is damaged. When you do that, all you see is some fireballs, a lot of smokes. You cannot really see what's going on in between. You see at the beginning, at the end, but nothing in between. This is a unique design where we design something called a high velocity actuator. It can generate up to 12,000 psi of pressure, and that mimic the blast load acting to the structure in a few milliseconds. And with that, you can do testing on structures made of different materials, made of different design, and they use that to assess different retrofitting technologies. And we also use these testing results to validate our numerical simulation. Let me see if I can play it one more time. And so you can do this kind of simulation, and then we compare to the test results. You can use that to simulate, for example, car crash, to evaluate the safety of the design on some of the energy generation facilities. And these are the founding members of the center. There are another 15 faculty from other departments throughout the UCSD campus that are affiliated with this center. Okay, so with this, I conclude my talk, and I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Emilie Hafner-Burton.
Thank you. I have this right here. Now for something completely different. Hi, good evening. I'm really honored to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation to come and spend a few minutes and share some of my research with you. And what I'd like to talk with you about tonight is human rights, the promotion and the protection of human rights. And I'm going to speak about human rights in a slightly unusual way, in a slightly different way than you might be used to, which is as a social scientist who spends a lot of time mucking around in large-scale data, looking for big patterns across many, many years and many, many countries to see if we can learn from a bird's eye view something about how to make our institutions better. So it's been many decades since the United Nations made a very radical statement, which was essentially to say that every single human being is born free with equality and dignity and their human rights. Right? That's a radical statement. And it doesn't matter who we are. It doesn't matter where we live. It doesn't matter what languages we speak. It doesn't matter who we love. We have these rights. And we believe that these are foundational, essential to our human wellness, right? To our human dignity, and that they are universal. And we also believe that they are indivisible. That means we're not supposed to pick and choose amongst different types of rights, and that's very important. So to realize this very profound declaration, we've had to create a very massive apparatus, a system to try and put these bold principles into practice. And so alongside the rise of growing civil society organizations that are designed to promote human rights, we've also had the rise of laws at the local, regional, domestic, and international levels designed to protect and promote human rights and to turn these aspirations into legally binding responsibilities on governments that they have to obey. Very, very important. And we've been tremendously successful in our ability to do that. What this map shows you is that there is almost not a single country in the entire world that hasn't made legally binding commitments to protect human rights. And if you're in the blues, it means you've made well over a dozen of these commitments. So governments are making pledges to commit to protect to human rights. That's extremely important. That's juxtaposed, however, with what this map shows you, which is that despite these many, many promises that are being made, human rights abuses are epidemic, right? They're rampant. We have a lot of problems in the world. So if we think about from the best metrics that we have in terms of data, we have seen freedom in the world drop for about 9 consecutive years in a row. And if you're living in a country in here that's coded green, you're living in a condition where you really have constraints on your freedom. If you are living in a country where most of the world's population is living coded in purple, it means you are living in a place where you essentially have no rights, where government violation of your rights and your human dignity are quite rampant. So what do we do about this problem? So for a very long time, we've believed that the solution to this problem is that we simply need to create more laws. We need more organizations, we need more procedures, we need more processes in place, and we need more actors on board. And if we can do that, then we'll be able to reduce this problem. We'll be able to save more lives and reduce the suffering of a lot of people. But you know what? We've made that assumption without the facts. We actually don't really have a lot of data that actually tells us anything about how well these institutions actually work. We've done it on assumption. And that's where my laboratory, and in fact not just my laboratory, but social science, now is beginning to play a very important role. Because we are working in collaboration with scholars around the globe to try and bring more systematic information, data to the table that might tell us something about, well, how well are these institutions actually working? How would we know how to evaluate their success? So that's a central piece of what we're doing. So in the few minutes that I have with you tonight, what I'd like to do is just tell you about a few of the things that we're actually learning from this broader picture of social science that we think might actually help us make improvements with regards to the protections for human rights. So number one, we've learned an awful lot by looking at the big historical trends about what the law actually does. And to the extent that we can tell you with some degree of confidence, and I think we can, what we can say is that there is a pretty strong correlation between government commitments to lots of legal institutions in a very narrow range of places. If you are a society that is already quite stable, you're not engaged in a civil war, you have strong civil society, you have consolidated domestic political institutions, these legal commitments can actually be quite useful. But let's face it, most of the world's population does not live under those conditions. And in most cases, from the best we can do from the historical data, we find very little relationship between the commitments that so many governments are making to uphold human rights practices, legally binding commitments, and what they're actually doing on the ground. And that should give us very careful pause to think about whether or not simply creating more laws is really the right strategy moving forward, or if there, something else needs to happen in that place. So that's one of the very important things that we've learned. We've also learned that there are patterns to how this system is working. Biased patterns, and it's really important to try and uncover those biases because it helps us to understand where we need to push to make improvements. So for instance, if we look at one of the main institutions in the world that's designed to promote human rights, or some component of it is in the United Nations, we can see very clearly that efforts to enforce the sort of universal norms of human rights are being done in very biased ways and systematic ways. And these biases seem to have very little to do with the legal commitments that governments are making. So it's not about the law, it's about other stuff. So we can show you quite systematically that there are reasons why certain governments are more likely to get called out in this system than not. They have much more to do with geopolitics, they have much more to do with economics, and sometimes they even have to do with personal connections between the arbiters that are making these decisions and the countries that they're calling out, right? We can also show you that there's lots of patterns of people of states who are not getting called out for different reasons, but who should be. So if you are a state that is participating in a UN peacekeeping operation, for example, we can show you quite clearly historically that your peers are very reticent to actually call you out, even when you're doing very, very bad things. So there are real serious patterns to how these universal principles are actually being played out in the political process. And this isn't just about states. We can also show you, we can look to see in the institutions designed to provide redress for the victims, we can show you that there are patterns there too, to who's actually getting help through the system. And I can tell you that women and children are at the bottom of that list. Systematic patterns, systematic bias. So it's very important for us to know. But you might not be at all surprised to learn that there are systematic patterns and biases in political institutions. It makes perfect sense. We need to know what they are in order to try and fix them, but it's not terribly surprising. But a lot of what the social science research is showing us is that it's actually a much broader issue. This isn't just about the UN or political corruption, that there are broader patterns that are problematic to the functioning of the system as a whole. So I'll give you a couple of other examples. One of the most important things central to the functioning of the human rights system as we've created it is information. You have to have producers of information. And some of the most reliable producers of information are non-governmental organizations. These are the folks, these are the heroes. These are the folks on the front lines in so many places. And what they say, what information they collect, and how they distribute that about human rights matters a lot. It shapes how we think and how we talk about human rights. It shapes the policies that we create and the process of implementation around those policies. Very importantly, it shapes the way we spend money and resources for the promotion of human rights. So what these folks say and think really, really matters, and they really are heroes. But here's the hitch. It's not neutral either. There are patterns that social science is uncovering in terms of the types of reporting that's happening through these organizations. They are very likely unintentional on behalf of these advocates, but they're patterns. So we can show you that there's bureaucratic inertia to the types of reporting that's being done in many of these institutions. That certain types of institutions are much more likely to produce information and have it disseminated. Those that are funded by or located in Western, wealthier, democratic countries, for example. And that those institutions tend to have preferences to focus and report on certain types of people, certain types of places, and certain types of situations. So there are systematic patterns to those stories that we need to uncover. So there's a lot more to tell you here. I'll simply end by concluding to say one, I think, very big and very important implication, which is that we are at a point in time where social science has entirely changed the possibility of what we can do with information to bring towards making the world a vastly better place. We need better analysis, we need honesty about what works, and social science is now in a place to actually bring knowledge to power to make the lives of people better. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. My name is Keith Pezzoli. I have the privilege of directing UCSD's Urban Studies and Planning program, and I'm a professor of teaching in the Department of Communication. So something like Urban Studies and Planning, you get to convene colleagues from economics and political science and other disciplines, the physical and natural sciences, to deal with the perfect storm that we're facing. There's a bit of urgency in the world with what's going on in terms of the global surge in the demand for food, water, fuel, natural resources, at the same time that we're experiencing climate change and ecological degradation. And just as we need it the most, the science to help us think through and deal with this stuff is increasingly off the rails of democracy. There's a science-society disconnect. So in the few minutes that I have with you today, I'm going to share with you what we're trying to do proactively at UCSD to deal with this perfect storm. And part of that is creating what we call a new Center for Sustainability Science, Planning, and Design. And sustainability science is deliberately trying to connect research to action. And a big part of what we do in this effort, and the group of colleagues that I'm working with, is promote what we're calling rooted community. And what I'd like to do is actually anchor what I say around a very specific place. And it's that place right there in yellow. That place in yellow is called the Ocean View Growing Grounds. And I don't know, is Bob Giorgio here? So we got permission to use this land from a private landowner. It's a yellow dot because if you could see the rest of that sort of polygon that's lighter blue, that's the Choyas Creek watershed. We surveyed 810 vacant lots in this area. It's one of the poorest areas of San Diego, yet one of the ripest areas for development. We're going to see a lot of development in that area, but the poverty rate is like $21,000 median family income. It's an area impacted by pollution. There's a high rate of obesity there. 27 to 34% of the population is obese. So we took an asset map of all the vacant land and we said, well, can we perhaps do a growing of food there in this place? Can we create rooted community around people getting attached to one another through growing food together, but also to the land? And this is a big part of the idea of rooted community. It's a concept that takes as at its core this notion that we are social animals. And think about this for a second. Let me check in with you and tell me if you think this is right. That as social animals, we need secure and healthy relationships with one another, right? We also need secure, yeah, yes or no, yeah. So far, so good, right? We need secure and healthy attachments to one another. Simultaneously, we need secure and healthy attachments to the land that we belong to. And I'm using land as a metaphor for the living land, the way in which the land ethic would speak to it, the animals, plants, and so forth. So this is that yellow spot that we dialed in on. We have access to this land. We got permission of the landowner to use this, to turn it into a living laboratory, if you will. And what's going on, so it used to be a vacant lot that was contaminated, needed to be cleaned up. And now currently there's a couple of food forests on that land. Over to the right there are 3 buildings that we're doing rainwater harvesting on. We're paying attention to this particular piece of land from the perspective of the food, water, energy trilemma. Because if we're on a food security tightrope and we need to begin producing food in more healthy ways, then taking advantage of vacant lots and land in the interstices of the urban area is one way to do that. This particular area where that yellow spot was in that larger context is called a food desert because people there don't have access to healthy food. And paradoxically, the whole obesity epidemic is partly because people have no recourse other than to fast food or junk food, or high caloric, low nutritional value food. So we're dealing with the food issue there by building these food forests, community gardens, also tying it into the residential area so that there's rainwater harvesting. It's a kind of a green infrastructure process. Now, one of the challenges in doing this kind of work is who's going to pay for it? Where's the value come from? So there's a very interesting connection here to climate change where, we're trying to reduce our carbon emission, right? The climate change problem that we're facing. So the state of California issued this bill saying that we need to reduce our carbon levels. And this is a heat map of the areas most likely to suffer the most intense impacts from climate change for various reasons. Drought, but also heat stroke, things like that. And the heat map is a composite index of exposure to pollution, but also socio-demographic factors like unemployment, violence, obesity, things like that. It's very interesting that they've done this, because what they're going to do now with the money that comes in through cap and trade for dealing with climate change, big companies that emit a lot of pollution have to buy allowances to emit the carbon, and those can be sold on the market. That money has to go to, is targeted now to 30% of it has to go to dealing with these vulnerable communities. So the area where we're growing where we're doing the food forest and the urban agriculture, this area here, we think should be eligible for some of that money. So in a way, we'll be capturing value from developers and others, energy producers, to actually begin to green infrastructure and to begin to deal proactively. And in doing that, as we take this, I see I got a yellow, as we take this perspective here, you can start to think about green infrastructure improvement districts so that you can extract value and begin to sort of pay attention to the food, water, energy trilemma. This is, oops, wrong way. This is my last slide, and I want to say that we live in a really amazing place. I gave you just this little yellow spot, right? But we live in an incredibly important milieu of innovation on the world stage. Geopolitically, being co-located with Mexico the way we are, a lot of what we try to do is weave this narrative of we live in a shared bioregion. I don't know if you know it, but Mexico is actually tilted up this way, and so when it rains, you get water running down into the U.S. side of the equation. So we have this sort of sister city watershed thing going on with all sorts of, I still got red, with all sorts of, it's just a lot of interesting stuff happening here that we'll just have to leave it at that. Let me leave it with, oops. So I will introduce Kib Rubinstein. 7 minutes is a...
I gotta hurry. Okay. I know I'm supposed to, wait, where's this? Okay. I am a theater director, and I'm used to having people do these technical things for me. So I do this little arrow. Look at that. These are neurons. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story that has nothing to do with what I wrote down. And this comes from listening to these brilliant people, and I've gotten, so my imagination has gone kind of wild listening to all of you. So when I was a little girl, I used to look up at the sky. How many of you did that? Oh. Nowadays. So I used to look up at the sky, and when I looked up at the sky, when the moon was full, I really believed that the moon was actually cut out of the sky, and there was a whole white world behind there. And in the process of researching the brain and working on neuroscience, working with neuroscientists and cognitive scientists in these last 5 years since the project that I have been researching, there has come to my attention through the neuroscientists' work the idea of something called liminality. And liminality is the space that exists between the known. So it is the daydreaming space. It is the space where the mysteries lie. If you believe in divine mysteries, I'm kind of a Jewish mystical person. You believe that the space in between the known is where we can actually catch and capture what we do not know of yet. And it is in that liminal space that creative innovation occurs. It is the space between all the facts we know. So in the 35 years that I've been training actors, I have, without even knowing it, been training them to look into the invisible space. And when I say look, I don't mean look just with the eyeballs. I mean look with the heart, the spirit, if you can say such a thing at UCSD, and not be in religion. To look into the spaces to make the invisible visible. And that is, I believe, what the artist does. And why, when there are all these questions all the time about what are the arts for, it's not necessarily so that we can see a beautiful sculpture, though that can be enormously precious to us. But it is actually to learn how and remember how we were able to receive information when we were first born. How we came into the world able to receive in every direction, both spherically and also what I call in 6 directions, kind of like a martial artist, prismatically, where you receive information and it moves through you, reflects inside of your deepest self, and comes out as something new. So this is what I have been engaged and deeply interested in my whole life as an artist and as a human being. So when I was looking at that white light that I thought was actually some reality beyond what our eyes can see, that was actually true in a way. However, when I was young, a man, landed on the actual moon. And I remember watching it, I was very young, and weeping because suddenly the moon was a solid thing. Just like when I fell on the ground when I was little and I got a cut and red stuff came out of it. And I thought I was made of light. So the fact that there was red stuff, there was like this reality, right? So in my work in neuroscience that has happened over the last 5 years, it has actually been a great journey into facts, or what we think of as facts, because of course they are ever-changing, yes? They are always filled with that light that's behind the circle of what I thought was the moon. And when I first saw a picture of this, and I thought that's what's going inside my brain, look at all that light. Isn't that really cool? I mean, that's like the light, behind the moon in a lot of ways. So how it began was this. I was sitting at a faculty meeting, and we were trying to just figure out, as a retreat, we were trying to figure out how are we going to save the theater department. This was 5 years ago. It's much worse now. And and we were talking about how to get people to come see the plays, the productions that we do. And we were kind of stuck on that. And I said, people think that theater is basically go stand there, memorize your lines, look good, and emote a little bit. And that actors actually wear masks, that they're masters at masks. But the fact is, this is probably an intuit, but it's a fact that I believe, is that in life, we as regular humans wear masks all the time. Yes? And that an actor's job is to actually have the courage to be authentic. And the training of an actor, and this is why it takes a long time, is a lot about ridding all the obstacles in the way to that authenticity, to getting to a core place, the core jewel that you started out with that is able to see light behind a circle in the sky and believe it to be true, and also be able to embrace a fact and to know the difference and to know what it feels like inside the porousness of the human body. So I began to talk about what we know when we train actors and other theater artists, which is pretty enormous. It also has to do with collaboration and synthesis. It has to do with the ability to like I said, make the invisible visible, to take catalysts that come in, accidents from all over the place, and make them into something that is new and useful to the world. And so I thought, maybe everybody should know about that. Like why, maybe they should know, first of all, that this is what we do, and how absolutely dramatic that is for training students to go into the world no matter what field they're in. So my colleague Lisa Porter and I embarked on a, oh, I'm done. My colleague, look, want to see the other pictures? Okay, so, oh, I'm supposed to do it. Hold on. Look at that. Okay, so I'm going to tell you two more things before I'm done. We embarked on this research project to develop a systematic training for the optimal creative thinking, in which we've isolated 12 different aspects or capacities of the creative mind, and we train for each one. We have a class called Cultivating the Creative Mind with students from across campus, scientists, golfers, people from the arts. There were some golfers in the class. They loved it. And what we do is we first start with our very own hearts, with the beat of our very own jazz. We learn to remember what matters to us as individuals, to remember who we are underneath the mask, and to allow that to meet with the brain, because many scientists believe that the human heart has its own nervous system separate from the brain. So if you want to know more, because I have many things to tell you, and I'm very late, I'm going to be out there. Thank you.
The next thing I'm going to slow you is I'm actually have somebody show you for me. So this is Harriet Thompson, who just this last weekend in San Diego, just a little bit down the road, ran a full marathon at age 92. I'm getting all these signals. I'll freak out if I have to stand in place. I will melt down. It's good I'm a pharmacist, so I know how to treat this when it happens. Okay, so for just any of those who haven't been keeping up, so she's the oldest to ever run a full marathon at 92, and it gets even more amazing after that. Is actually she's running 17 or 16 of these, and the one she missed, it's because she was receiving chemo, which is probably a pretty good reason for missing a marathon, and so she's recently proceeded with that. So. So our goal at UCSD Health Sciences is for every 92-year-old to be able to do that, and if they want to. And so if it is up to them, that would be their choice. And what we're seeing here is there's a lot of people that are over 65, they're in their senior years, that are doing amazing things and are making amazing contributions to society. And in these what we used to call these graying years. And I think what we're interested in is it expands beyond. I don't know if I'm not getting signals. Okay. It expands beyond just the contributions that they can make to society, or that there's going to be fewer people to take care of the elderly as our population ages, which I'm going to show you in a second. But actually because for many people, the finest moments of achievement, of self-actualization, of self-realization, of productivity actually come in their latter years. And if there's any way in terms of as healthcare providers, we could do more to allow that to take place through our activities. That's what our goal is at the Skaggs School of Pharmacy and UCSD Health Sciences. And this is where it gets a little spooky, is 65 years ago, we had plenty of people to take care of our seniors. Plenty. So we had over 16 for every worker for every Social Security retiree, and you can see how this has plummeted in the decades that have followed. That we've it's now 3 for every 3 workers for every Social Security retiree, and that is projected to reach 2, which is actually the critical value where we're below replacement rate. And it's no coincidence that 2030, when we release that 2, is actually also the moment when Social Security and Medicare are actuarially going to be bankrupt. And so that's another talk, but. But what's important is what can we do knowing that we are dealing with this? And part of that is what I was interested in, why I got into my field, is pharmaceuticals and medication, appropriate use of medications has proven to be an outstanding and cost-effective way of providing care for individuals if it's done correctly. It's less expensive than hospitalizations. It's less expensive than routine office visits. It's less expensive than medical care if it can be done correctly. And some of our work has shown that when looking at the other way, that hospitalizations, the increase in odds of a hospitalization if you're not receiving your necessary medications increases by 2. And your medical costs and your hospitalization costs also increase when you don't receive your necessary medications. So that's what we're focusing on. But medications there's a lot of them. So the average number of medications that people in the age bracket of 65 to 75 are on is 14. So that's 14 different medications. So if you think about the waking hours in a day, you could theoretically be taking a different medication every hour of the day, almost. And that actually hides some complexity because, as we all know, you take these medications, many of them you take them more than once a day. And in fact, when you look at people that are 85 years old, the number goes up to 18. And in fact, in the clinic that I work in, routinely I see much more than this. So we're looking at patients that if you include their as-needed medications, they're in their 20s. So how do we manage that? And the challenge is that just up the road, if you go up the 405 at UCLA, they did some work looking at how much time is actually spent with a doctor in an office going over the evidence-based portions of a new medication. So how long do we actually talk to the patient about the new med? And they timed it, the average was 26 seconds. So 26 seconds, and if you've got a chronic syndrome, you will likely be taking this for the rest of your life. So that's talking about the best ways to take it, the possible drug interactions, things to think about with food, how to manage adverse reactions. All of that's supposed to be done in 26 seconds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but then if you actually kind of step back and you think about it, you're like, yeah, that sounds about right. That's what they spend, but that's not right. And so what we're trying to do at UCSD with a couple of the programs that I'm involved with is doing one-on-one, real-time, face-to-face meetings with seniors where we review all of their medications. It's called Medication Therapeutic Management, and part of the Obamacare, the Accountable Care Act, actually provided for this as a requirement that needs to be offered for Medicare recipients. And so we meet with them face-to-face with their caregivers, which oftentimes is a family member, and we discuss with them about their medications, how they're feeling about them. If there's ways to optimize, many times if there's ways that we can reduce duplicate usage of medications, we talk about that, and we also develop what's called the Medication Action Plan, which is formulating to get them involved in care. There's a number of studies that are now being produced right now, and there's actually federal funding for this, showing that if we can get individuals what they call the self-management and self-activation, if we can get them involved in their care so they understand it, and they can participate in the decision-making. They're not just passively being told what they're going to be doing, but they can be involved in steering how their health care is delivered, that great things can happen in terms of outcomes and costs. When we meet with them, it's a little bit longer than 26 seconds. It's actually 45 minutes. I teach biostatistics, not math, but I think it's more than 90 times longer. And in fact, that is not an that's not an excess amount of time to review their medications. But we're doing a lot here on this, basically around the San Diego area, to try to improve the care that we deliver to seniors in terms of improving their medication management so they can live more independent lives. And one last comment. So that what we found is for hospitalizations, when they've done some recent work that's shown that hospitalizations that are related to medications, that when we looked at how much of those hospitalization costs were related to poor adherence, which is, this is simply just not taking your medications as directed, the cost was $100 billion. And that's actually been estimated, it's $100 billion to $300 billion, which actually the bailout in 2008 for TARP was $800 billion. So theoretically, a chunk of that could have been financed with this, which is an avoidable cost. And that's, when you talk about this as the end of I think, of the dessert of the taste. So for the presentations that we had, that's $100 billion that was avoidable. That's what we could have spent on the arts. That's what we could have spent on urban planning. That's what we could spend on engineering. That's money that we could have used in so many other ways if we just found a way to take medication more appropriately. and I'll be happy to take questions when we go outside. Thank you.
How about that for dessert? Pretty good, huh? Yeah. Okay, big round of applause for all of our speakers.